Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. 3 things you will learn from this episode. Number 1, why building your strategy is just the beginning of the process. Number 2, what conscious leadership is. And number 3, how companies are using heart-centered leadership to build team health. Christine Hildebrand is a dynamic C-level executive, transformational leader, ICF Certified Leadership Coach, Master Certified Spirit Coach, Certified Lumina Learning Facilitator, Certified HeartMath Team Facilitator, a meditation teacher, Ordained Minister, and intuitive healer. That's a mouthful. She is celebrated for blending business innovation with human-centered leadership, something you know we care a lot about at this show. As the founder and CEO of Cofinity Consulting, Christine integrates pragmatic strategies with intuitive insights to align people-first cultures with strategic business goals. Her leadership combines corporate expertise and entrepreneurial spirit, honed through top roles in Fortune 500 companies, startups, and consulting with CEOs and leadership teams across diverse industries. Christine, welcome to the show. So happy you're here.
Thank you. That was a huge mouthful and so overwhelming to have that read back to me. So thank you for having me and this opportunity to share with your audience.
Well, you earned it. So it's all of your amazing things that you've done. So I always start every show the same, and I always ask, would you please share your story?
Well, the story is vast and has definitely taken me on twists and turns like many of our stories do. I was born and raised in San Francisco, in inner city San Francisco. I'm a Spanish background, so we were raised in a very diverse neighborhood in San Francisco. And I grew up with clairvoyant, or I was born with clairvoyant and clairaudient, basically sensing energy and people around me, not only what they were saying, but what the energy was and how they presented. So I always been really sensitive to that. And about age 10, I had a sexual assault experience that really shifted my life in terms of like, I thought I was in co-creation with the heavens, creator God, the angels, however you want to point them to, or point to rather. Um, and that moment was less about the actual um, violation itself and more that I cut off from my power.
Yeah.
I cut off from the connection to my own higher source and said, okay, if this is the way it's going to go down, then I'm going to do life the way I want to do it, and became very ego driven and achievement oriented and really felt like I was alone basically in the world. And that lasted until I was 37. 10 to 37, did all of the things like, went to school, went to business school, got the credentials, got married, had the big house, had, the car, had the 2 kids. I'm the oldest of 4. And so there was a lot of pressure to be a certain way and certainly to make it in the corporate world in the 90s, which was very male driven and what we needed to do in order as women to adopt masculine tendencies in order to be seen, valued, and heard in a corporate space.
100%.
Right? I mean, we've all done it.
Yeah. No, I for sure did it. And I was the only woman on many all-male teams and thought the only way to lead was through sports analogies and, bro it up. And it felt so inauthentic to me, but I didn't have any other examples of what it could be until later. So yeah, I completely relate to that.
Yeah, and the women that were role models were giving away more than I felt was in integrity with me. And so I left a lot of my corporate jobs where women mentors were well, not being valued by men in a lot of ways, but also women mentors that were not doing it in a way that felt integritous. And so it's really launched my entrepreneurial effort. But at 37, I had an awakening, which I call an awakening in a driveway, where basically I really came into like what was real. And I knew I had to get back to this authentic connection to my own power and really reconcile my relationship with how I defined higher power,
Mm.
right? Because my experience is that however you define it, it resides in you. It resides in your own heart. And this links to conscious leadership because we're in connection to what we value and where our true ethics and integrity lies with ourselves. And I knew I had to get back there. And that meant reorganizing a lot of things. And that meant leaving my marriage.
Mm.
That meant I went through an addiction with my daughter, and we went through that. And so there was a lot of lessons along the way in order to get to this alignment. And then I was fortunate to find the Foundation for Spiritual Development, where I spent 9 years training and kind of like working through some of these things in the past, and also coming into the presence of my own truth. And
Mm.
this is what I try to bring with leaders, and it's part of conscious leadership, is what is the presence of your own truth in the moment?
Yeah. What you said resonates with me so much, and I've never shared this on the show, but I also had a fair amount of clairvoyance growing up and really kind of honed it during college and was living so vibrationally, and I was open and really trusting my instincts. And when I moved to Boston, it was not the same environment. People were very closed off. I actually had people tell me I have enough friends, I don't need any more. And I had never experienced that. And so I just clammed up and I shut it all off. And I was like, no, no, too vulnerable, can't live that way. And it took me decades to open back up again. So I completely understand. Now, your experience was far different than mine in that I can't imagine the trauma and the pain that you had to go through to endure the sexual assault and then recover and make sense of it throughout your later years. So talk a little bit about, that ego-driven life versus the spiritual driven side, because I think a lot of people use their brains to motor through the world. And I'm guilty of that myself and don't
Me
feel.
too.
Don't feel. It's easier to
Yeah.
just rationalize and be logical.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I liken it to living from the inside out versus the outside in,
Hmm.
right? I mean, ego is something that's very healthy from a standpoint of keeping us safe, right? And but yet really is responsible for creating a lot of false narratives, right? Like fear, doubt, scarcity,
Hmm.
which are illusions. Really, if we're really challenging them, they're really illusions. And um, so egoic driven seems that it seems that you have blinders on and you don't really have the peripheral vision that's possible, which means that you're not open to the the broader possibilities of what could be possible in your life as well. For me, it felt very contracting, and that I was on a mission and it had to be black or white. There was a lot of duality, and things were right and things were wrong. There
Yep.
wasn't a like openness to, well, maybe there's a piece of that that's good and a piece of that that's good, and other embracing of life in its totality that could enhance every single experience. And so I was very closed off, and it's still somewhat of a default thing that I have to deal with daily. So it's not like all of a sudden I'm like evolved.
Yeah.
This is a constant thing because I think society, our familiar structures, our society structures, the way we define success in our modern day world is heavily egoic driven.
100%.
It's not like you were getting rewards for enlightenment
No.
or rewards for evolution or conscious thinking or awareness. We're not recognizing
I
those
don't know
things.
if people know how to recognize that.
But we certainly feel it when someone is responding one way or the other.
Sure, of course.
Um,
So
so
let's dig in a little bit on conscious leadership because um, in my experience, I think we're in a major paradigm shift. And I feel like there is this moment where women are stepping to the forefront and leading differently. And it is welcomed and it's refreshing and it's great. This is not a dig on all the men in the world. There are plenty of men who I really believe recognize that there is this need for change and are doing it.
yeah.
But talk about why conscious leadership needs to happen and maybe what the benefits are of actually experiencing that.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, first a discussion about the genders, right? And that we have to stop this separation between, like male and
Yeah.
female. We both possess masculine tendencies
Yep.
and feminine qualities and feminine masculine qualities and feminine qualities. And frankly, what we need right now in conscious leadership is both.
Yep.
So I just want to say that about to male leaders and to female leaders is that there is a blending of both. And that is the one thing that personally I've had to reconcile because I adopted, as you were saying, like earlier, these masculine qualities and made them like the hard part of who I was, but
Right.
I also had to adopt and incorporate the softer elements of who I was. So I really feel like conscious leadership is about reconciling those masculine and feminine qualities within each one of us as human beings because we have the capacity. So I want to just dispel the gender sort of thing, like
I'm
conscious
glad you
leadership,
did that.
feminine thing, and it's not a masculine thing. Listen, in this paradigm, yes, you're right. We need to go from the extractive model of business where we have to, in order to get commercial success, it has to be on the back of people on our planet.
Yep.
We have to move beyond that because we're seeing signs it's not sustainable, both in the mental health stress and obviously Mother Nature is telling us. So, what are the options, right? What are the options? And do we shift our mindsets, which I really feel like this is part of conscious leadership, to saying, hey, listen, who said that we can't have both? Who
Mhm.
said that we couldn't have commercial thriving and human thriving and planetary thriving together? Who made up that rule?
Right.
And so it really is what I've been shown in my own conscious development work and my own spiritual development work through the elevation and the practice of meditation and going to higher states of awareness myself is that I've been shown we can have all of it,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
so
and
part of what,
when you
yeah,
think about it just from a product perspective, there is a demand right now for sustainable practices and ethical harvesting, and the people that are working on whatever product are being taken care of, and we are voting with our dollars. It's a louder conversation than I can ever remember. And that's just one example of if you are in business today, you not only have to stand for something good, but you have to show people how you're doing it and why it's it's conscious, why it's doing good for the world. And that I don't remember a time in my life where we were asking for that.
yeah, it's definitely in demand, but I also think that the leaders making P&L decisions are looking at the cost benefit ratio of those types of decisions. And sometimes it doesn't come down to that, but it comes down to the right thing to do.
Right.
Right now, I mean, we're being shown a lot of different things that are symptoms to our choices
Mm.
and how we're managing our resources and playing for the infinite game is something we need to be looking for. And what is going to create sustainability in both the human aspects of your company culture
Mhm.
and what is going to be creating sustainability within the value you provide your audience and your customer. Those things, those investments are going to pay off in terms of sustainability.
Yeah.
Your lack of turnover, people contributing higher rates of their expendable income. And
Mhm.
certainly, as you're saying, a market that is more sensitive to, like, yeah, if I have to pay more, I'm going to go with this brand. because I know their ethical practices are there and they
Right.
care about their people. I want to just share one story because
Yeah, please.
recently I went to New Zealand and I visited my sister who is on a film. Um, and I learned some really critical things while being on set with her. She's executive producer in charge of a huge budget and many, many people. And in perilous situations and in really, really risky life life-threatening shooting scenarios. And I got to thinking about the similarities between that and a CEO running a company.
Yep.
And I was fascinated because there is so much logistics
Really.
that's necessary in running a company. So many people that have to be coordinated. But the one thing that was so interesting that my sister was doing, and I heard story after story on set when I was with her, was that she cared about people.
Mm-hmm.
And that created an environment where everyone banded together to create this one piece of creative output. And
Mm-hmm.
isn't that what companies are doing? Is that we are all like, we all have this goal in mind of what we're doing, value generation,
Mm.
whether it's a product or a service. How do we coordinate and relate to that purpose and commitment is really up to the leaders to demonstrate care for the people and coordinate that inherently.
Yeah.
And so this goes to one of your questions about, like strategy being your
Yeah, that's
first,
where I wanted to go next.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, is that, anyone can write a strategy, right? And
Yeah, I mean
often,
the
yeah,
strategy is just a map, right? It's just this is the direction we want to go. Um, but if you micromanage your people, if you don't value them, if you don't create a safe space for them, that strategy is not gonna go well. It's not going to go as fast as you want it to. And when you were talking about your sister, I was remembering a few weeks ago we had Greg Berlanti on the show, and Greg is this, enormous Hollywood producer, not physically enormous, but very successful Hollywood producer. And we talked about how when he was putting together a TV show or a film, how it's so important to let everyone do the jobs they were hired for. And it was the first time, and I grew up as a theater kid, it was the first time that I likened business to a play. And, the stage crew has their job and you need to give them the space to act. And the writer has their job and you're responsible for carrying their ideas. The actors have their jobs. And I just I could relate to what you were saying about your sister because she has to, especially in a dangerous situation, you have to let, all of the safety precautions, you let them do their job. Don't interrupt them. Let them shine and do what they need to. But when you think about it from a business perspective, when you give people the space to do the jobs they were hired for, everyone's gonna win. It's such a natural thing, but we've got lost in that. And I wish and I hope that more leaders will get back to that and recognize that micromanagement is not inspiring. Giving people that space is.
yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. And I part of conscious leadership and our leadership program is that we look at conscious leadership in three levels, and I'm going to get to like it's important to have awareness of self, awareness of others, and awareness of the system. And so we build capacity in our program in conscious leadership in each one of those levels. So for the film set is having awareness, enough awareness of self and resourced capacity, right? Which is our number one job, is to
Mhm.
show up present, whole and full to be able to provide in order to sense others what they need in order to be successful. And the stage crew may need something completely different from
Right.
craft service or the makeup costume crew or even the cast,
Yeah.
right? And so Valerie, my sister asked, what do you need in order to be successful?
Love
So
that.
these are the three questions that I advise every CEO to ask their team. It's like, what's important to us?
Mhm.
Right? Which is basically like the strategy.
Yeah.
What's important to us? What is necessary for us to, in order for us to achieve it? What has to occur
Mhm.
in order for us to achieve that? And what's blocking us?
Mm.
Right? And so you start to break down not only like what each individual role and team member needs,
Mhm.
but you start to create cross-functional networking within the team to understand, like, hey, I'm sensitive to that. You need that resource. I need this resource. And hey, let's work together to create both.
Mm, love
And
that.
so this is super important because once the strategy is done, and it's important that as you're creating that, I liken it to a canvas, right? A painting that you're painting, and everyone is looking at the same painting, hopefully, because we're all aiming for the same target. But that you stop and you say, okay, if that's our what's important to us, and if that's where we're headed, then what has to occur in order for that to happen?
Yeah.
What resources, support do you in each individual need in order for that to happen? And that's the piece that we don't spend time doing. We just say,
Mm,
okay, let's go. And we're assuming that everyone has reconciled their own doubts about whether that's even possible,
yeah.
or that, oftentimes we look at a strategy and let's say you're ahead of a functional area and you're like, this is going to be really tight on my team to execute this given the resources we have. And so we have to push, right? Which means it's pushing everybody into danger zones and lack and exhaustion and stress. And so they're not going to perform as well. But if we're stopping to really understand what people need in order to be resourced, we're more apt to not only like achieve that vision, but maybe
Mm,
even what's beyond that, which is a higher possibility and potential.
mm, so good. So let's talk a little bit about heart-centered leadership and team health and why this is important. Because, I mean, you and I are pretty in tuned and we trust our instincts, but for those leaders that maybe it's their first leadership job or their mid-career and they haven't really delved in, what advice do you have for them?
Well, this goes to like what's the health of the system itself of the group, and we were talking about, the metaphor of a film set, but we haven't used the metaphor of sports teams enough in company culture, right? Where everyone has their specific roles to play, but if we score a touchdown or a goal, it's because the coordinative effort of everyone,
Right.
right? And so if there's a weak link on the field and someone is injured, then there's a compensation that happens. But in corporate and in many companies, that weakness is in the organization for whatever reason, whether it be lack of resources or somebody is just going through a tough time in their lives, it's thought of as a blame or a fault or a weakness, as opposed to something we rush in and support. And so within the team health and looking at heart-centered leadership, we're sensitive to, not only what we need in order to be successful, but how are you today?
Yeah.
Right? What's going on? Um, asking and starting your team meetings out with, what's the biggest thing on my mind today, and what am I most proud of, and where do I need help?
Hmm.
And so we start team meetings that way, and I advise our clients to do the same because it really lands a lot of connection with where people are. Put your phones down and just listen to each other the first 15 minutes of every meeting answering those questions. What's
Yeah,
the biggest thing on my mind and what am I most proud of? Let's celebrate. And where do I need help? Which is tough to ask.
it is. It is. And I really do believe that what you just described is so important in getting your team to see each other, but not just see each other, want to invest in each other and communicate and work together is such an important piece of leadership. And I knew that from leading pretty big teams that I needed them to care. And especially like I ran one team was a whole bunch of acquisitions and we were the island of misfit toys. I mean, nobody cared what anybody else did. They're like, I don't know what that is. It sounds hard. I'll be over here doing my thing. And I knew I needed them to care about each other. And once they started to understand what the others were doing, they're like, oh, now I get why we're on the same team. Oh, I have to introduce you to Bob. Like he's got our stuff already, but he needs what you've got. And
Yeah.
That's magic right there. But that's also trust, and it's creating that safe space for people to be able to share without judgment. And that's a skill that not every leader has. So I love that you're
Right.
teaching that.
Yeah, and creating safety, which you just pointed out. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
it's huge.
definitely one of them. And I just finished a certification through HeartMath Institute, which has been for the last 30 years developing science around the human heart and how the human heart emits certain experiences that we can feel and sense. Just like when someone shows up depressed or unhappy or
Yes.
frustrated,
Yeah.
everyone feels it. And so the process in building team health is to be able to lay our cards on the table and say, okay, this is my frustration and how do we work through it together
Mm.
is part of the vulnerability. But on the other side of vulnerability is so much richness, right? In terms of the connectivity and the increased productivity a team could have if they're courageous to be vulnerable with one another. And so but getting facilitation and support to do that, because oftentimes a leader has to be part of the team in that situation versus
Yeah.
facilitating that all the time. And that's where, we come in to kind of create that safe container and um, build accountability with everyone in terms of the qualities of the heart-centered experience that they're having personally that they're bringing,
Yeah.
right? And everyone taking accountability for that because that's an important part of showing up fully
Mm.
in your presence to contribute, right? Even if you're not 100%, just owning that you're not 100% and you need a hall pass for that meeting is acceptable, you
Hmm.
know?
So let's shift gears a little bit. What inspires you, Christine?
What inspires me? I mean, certainly conversations like this inspire me. Being in hearing human triumph stories inspires me.
Same.
Definitely reading a lot of books right now. I mean, Eckhart Tolle and Oprah are doing The New Earth again. I mean, just rereading that. Um, Nature inspires me.
Yeah.
Definitely. And there's as much that may be going on in the world that feels chaotic and uncontrollable,
Mhm.
and that we're losing control, is that we remember to not build an apathetic edge to our souls and our spirits, given the times we're living in, is that we connect to others who are holding possibility and hope and light, and we connect to that parts of ourselves because this is really the power of the human spirit right now to
Mhm.
go through the transformation that we're collectively in
Yeah.
and to bring that energy to our companies and to our families and to our communities. So that inspires me to keep doing that work.
Mm.
So,
And what would you like your legacy to be?
oh, well, that's a big thing. My legacy is my two children, Camille and Will.
Mm.
And I'm content with that because they're phenomenal.
That's amazing. What's next for you?
Um, Travel, adventure, joy,
All good things.
and love.
And how do people find you?
On my website, cofinityconsulting.com, and certainly I'm on LinkedIn
Perfect.
and welcome just opportunities to have conversations. So thank you for this.
Well,
I
I
appreciate
so
it.
appreciate you being on and sharing so much of your story. And guys, if you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go leave a 5-star review at Apple or Spotify. I love getting guests like Christine and keeping the show going. So your support means so much. Christine, you've been amazing. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank
Have a
you. Thank
great
you. My
day.
pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for
Have a
having me.
great day, everybody. Go out, lead with heart, and take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. Are you ready to elevate your leadership style and create an exceptional workplace that stands out from the crowd? I'm here to introduce you to a game-changing resource that will transform the way you lead and shape your company culture. It's time to embrace the power of top-down culture. This practical guide empowers your leadership for lasting success, helping you create a workplace where everyone thrives. Get top-down culture today, and let's reshape the future of leadership together. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.